All right, sit back, relax. It's time for another Laneway Talks.
Well, we're talking to Tom Hosie today, one of our Laneway artists who's been with us for quite a while. He has a rich history in the Australian music business, and we're going to explore that a bit and see where he came from and then where he is today. Tom, are you there?
I'm here, Vince. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Well, Tom, let's start off from, I think for artists, Tom is presently he has his band called Remora, who we have a lot of titles released through Laneway, but we're going to go right back to the start and just explore a bit where Tom's from. So where you're from, Australia or England? Or
yeah,
where?
Well, from Melbourne.
Yeah, originally from Melbourne?
Yeah, born in Melbourne. And the music started when I was 10, took up the drums. But it didn't really start till I joined a band called Argus.
Well, we're going to explore that a bit. I was going to ask you before we get to where you joined your first band. I mean, where did you go to school, and was it a school of, I suppose, musical inspiration? Was it kind of musical, or were there a lot of music orientated people there?
Yeah, no, I went to St John's in Hawthorn. That's a pretty stock standard Australian Catholic school. The only music that went on there was the occasional marching band. And I guess I'd have to say that I did make my first pair of drumsticks at that school, but didn't really participate in any musical activities there, really. It was very standard education, academic.
Well, when did you? So therefore, being at St John's, obviously a Catholic. Hope it wasn't a Morris Brothers school, but anyway.
Could have been.
When did you get the inspiration there to become a drummer?
Well, look, the inspiration, I guess, would be largely once again due to Argus, seeing Argus at a school concert, and that was a real turning point. And they were also rehearsing a lot at the local community centres, which, I tended to go down to from time to time. So it became a bit of a thing. And they were certainly a bit of a thing around that eastern side of Melbourne. So look, just seeing the band certainly caught my interest. And,
but you obviously, Tom, you'd had a passion for music. I mean, not everybody has a passion for music, and they just listen to I'll use Triple M or whatever, or the likes 3XY back then, and that's all they know is what they're fed. And they're fed a lot of good bands, but that's all they're interested in. But therefore, when did you get that inspiration that you want to actually be part of making that music?
Well, once again, I think I fiddled around, with drums to a degree, and listened to records like every other kid. But when I saw Argus on stage, I might have been about 12, I suppose.
Yeah,
I just got it really hit me that was something that I thought was unusual. Enough to get my attention. So I would still have to say that, seeing Argus on that stage as a kid, affected me. And, I was, inspired to at least have aspirations at that time.
So was drumming, that was your passion then? You didn't kind of pick up a guitar and go, I'd like to play guitar?
No. Drums were the only thing at that time, and for a long time after that.
Tom, so were you a self-taught drummer, or were you a taught drummer, a learnt drummer?
No, I went to drum lessons for about 2 years, and I suppose I learnt the basics there, It probably wasn't the greatest instruction I've ever had.
But you're a sight reader, were you? You sight read?
I did, yes. I did learn how to sight read, but I didn't have any use for it, didn't find it very interesting, so that didn't last very long.
Yeah, so you got the rock and roll addiction, didn't you? Not the classical addiction.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I was to make a lot of noise.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. So, let's go and let's hit then and talk about, you said Argus was the first band that you joined. What was that? What kind of style of music were they, and what did they do?
Yeah, well, I guess they were sort of a hard rock band of the time, doing, classic British stuff. But the real story with that was, as I said earlier, I was, sort of super impressed when I saw them and sort of became a bit of a fan around the area. And then one day, the guitarist, Peter, actually, who I knew sort of, through association, he came over to my place and said, play us a song. I want to know how you play. And the next day he turned around and said, do you want to join the band? So that was a real shock.
Why had they lost their drummer? What had happened?
I think they'd lost the singer and the drummer was transitioning to vocals. So there was a drum position that had become, vacant in the band.
Wow, that's fantastic.
All of a sudden.
Right. So how long did that last for, Tom?
So I joined the band and I did one school gig with them, which was, super stressful, but, really was the beginning of me playing live and getting a taste for that. Yeah. But it wasn't much longer after that they decided to change the format of the band and they brought in another guitarist. So it went from a 3-piece to a 5-piece kind of quick.
See, I mean, you did mention before English bass type. Did you? Did you say that?
Style of music, yeah.
Yeah. So what we're moving towards is that twin guitar type thing, yeah?
Look, I guess I don't want to speak on behalf of the guys too much, but it was definitely, Thin Lizzy was in the background there, all that sort of thing.
I mean, what time? When are we talking? 77, 78, 79?
We're talking 75.
Wow, yeah, okay. Yeah, definitely Thin Lizzy, Kiss, Bad Company, all that kind of.
Yeah.
We're right into that flow.
Deep Purple.
Gotcha. Deep Purple, Burn and whatever. So okay. So how long did Argus last for, and where did it go to after that?
Argus didn't last very long. It transitioned with the new members into a band called Steeler.
Yep.
And then that as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-piece lasted, I would say, about 2 to 3 years.
Right. Now, well, I just want to tell the audience that if you want to look up Argus on, I'll let you Spotify anyway. I think quite a lot comes up. So if you put in Argus Rags to Riches, which is one of the songs, then you will get this particular Argus to come up. With Steeler, I should look that up, Tom, and just see, well, what comes up with Steeler, because once again, there's a lot of bands called Steeler.
Yeah.
So if I'll do that while we're here, talking to everybody and talking to you, and go Steeler. What would be a song? I think. I
don't know. You've got the playlist there, Vince. You've got to
yeah, you're right.
Well, while you look, I would say, so you've got Argus transforming into Steeler. The drummer from Argus became the singer for Steeler.
Yeah.
And then I came in and became the drummer for Steeler, and we had a new guitarist named Tom Hosie. So there was 2 guitarists and Joe Mastro on bass, and Peter Cook on the other guitar, who was the original guitarist for Steeler.
Now I've got here. If the audience plug in Steeler, Stealer, and Down and Out Over You, or 10 to 9. Or the Junkie, then you will come up with Steeler. So then you'll be listening to the right band. So Steeler, and I see there too, you actually did some covers of, again, we're back to that English rock, essentially. So, American too.
Yeah, a lot of covers, like I say, Thin Lizzy, Queen, all those bands of that era. And the band would rehearse ferociously, very dedicated, and we would play relentlessly, for those 3 or 4 years. We did so many gigs around town. It was really a strong start to a drumming career.
And what a fantastic time it was too, Tom, that you could that you could play that many times and get gigs. And I presume, if for the younger audience, you don't understand that back in those days, you had to walk in with your PA system, and that was a big PA system, so you'd actually need a road crew, correct?
That's right, yes, yeah. Even for a band that wasn't getting paid a lot, we had our own truck, our own PA, own road crew, and so yeah, it was sort of small-time touring, but you were doing all the classic beer barns and clubs in St Kilda, and travelling out to the countryside every now and then for a bit of fun and games out there.
Okay, so all right, we've got Argus and Steeler. When one of the questions here is, when did you consider that you'd actually gone professional, Tom?
Well, when I first got paid, I guess, which was, probably later than it should have been. But, yeah, look, I didn't actually consider myself professional until I joined up with James Freud back in 1979, I think.
Well, that's after Steeler, correct?
Yeah, so we went from, I was in Steeler for those years, and then the band split up and it became a band called Livewire with the guitarist with Tony, the guitarist, another fellow called Peter Hewson, and
just while you're saying that, we're referring to Tony Lugden, and Tony Lugden was the original guitarist in Pseudo Echo, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that became Livewire. How long did that last for?
That lasted for about 6 to 8 months, but we did a lot of work, and it was quite a good band. But through whilst that band was sort of cruising along, I got a call from Freud's manager, who I'd met over the years playing around Melbourne.
So hold on, but now we're referring to James Freud. So if that was happening then, was he still in Teenage Radio Stars, or had they? I
believe so.
Yes, and that was with Sean Kelly.
I would say so. I'm pretty sure he was working on his first solo album at the same time. So that might be a little bit of overlap there. It's hard to say.
Yeah, gotcha. So therefore, you moved to James Freud, yeah? Yeah.
So I get this call from his manager Barry. And
that wouldn't be the famous Barry Earl.
Yeah, it's one and the same. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be There's this. Yeah, we'll talk about those stories at the pub. We'll never put them on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, Barry rings me up and says, "Tom, once you join the band, we're going to England. We'll be there in 6 months. What do you say?" And I said, "Yeah, stop pulling my leg." But sure enough, he had me down for an audition. And he said, "Do you know any guitarists?" And I said, "I do know a guitarist." So I invited Tony down, Tony Lugden.
Yeah.
And we had an audition with James and their bass player Mick and their keyboard player Roger in St Kilda at Barry's home. And it just blew up. James was throwing himself against the wall. Tony was ripping his guitar, and it was just a great little session. So we just joined the band from then on, and off we went.
Wow. So... that being what, 79?
That was about 79.
Right. So
you around the traps for about 6 months.
But hold on, had you had a number one hit by then?
No. This is pre all of that. We were just the next incarnation of James Freud at that point.
Oh, really? Then, the band morphed.
Yeah, from Teenage Radio Stars, whatever he was doing there, into the Radio Stars, James Freud and the Radio Stars.
Yeah.
With that lineup. And that was going well. They were a really exciting band. He's doing the Tiger Lounge and the London Tavern and, all the other clubs around town. But that was very exciting, that period. And then Barry got us hooked up with a tour with Gary Newman.
In Australia?
In Australia. It was Gary's first Australian tour. And that created an opportunity for some notoriety. Gary took on the band as like a protege, invited us overseas to do some work, which we eventually did go over there and created an album that wasn't really fit for release, but that's a long story.
So this is pre-Modern Girl? Correct.
And whilst we were over there, spending some time in London, the single shot up the charts, and the record company decided, drop everything, come back, let's promote the album.
Right, gotcha. Okay, so you over to England and then record some essentially demos then, were they?
Yeah.
And then back to Australia, which one of them became a hit.
Yep.
And then off you went. So you recorded the album here?
No, the album was already recorded that got released under James Freud.
Right.
Right, which was Breaking Silence. That was already recorded. It was in the can. We were messing around overseas with Gary at that point in time, and eventually Mushroom released the single whilst we were overseas, and the single took off, and therefore Mushroom said, "Come on, you guys, get back here. We need to promote this thing."
Tell me something. So before you went to England, right?
Yeah.
And you're playing around the traps here. What kind of audience were you pulling? Was it big yet?
Look, it was. It wasn't huge, but it was certainly, fanatical fans.
Well, like 50% capacity at venues?
At least, yeah.
Right. Because I remember seeing James Freud in Berlin, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was in Bulleen. I don't even remember the name of the pub, but it was in Bulleen.
Yeah.
And I would gather that was an 800 capacity, and that was jam-packed, Tom, and I mean jam-packed.
Well, when we came back to promote...
You there, Tom?
Pardon?
So you dropped out there, Tom.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, when we came back, we'd been off the road for about 3 months and the single was shooting up the charts. It took a month off, took on a new guitarist by the name of Randy Bulb.
Oh, yeah.
And then we started to tour as James Freud in Berlin.
So who was in the band then? So you, James, who was on bass?
Mick Prague was still on bass.
Yeah.
Roger Mason was on keyboards.
Yep.
And when after the trip to the UK and the single started to get traction, we took on a new guitarist, Randy Bulpin, who had been working with Mondo Rock.
Right. Gotcha.
So that was the lineup at that stage. Now, when that lineup went on the road, we hadn't played for 4 months, and the single had been going up the charts. So we just broke records all over Australia. It was packed out wherever we went.
Yeah, gotcha.
Really exciting time. Yeah.
I mean, he was a real showman too. So what you were getting was, I mean, you're getting it. If I remember correctly, it sounded really good, and it was quite loud in comparison to the record. The record wasn't quite as loud, so it was loud live. And on top of that, you've got a front man who was quite charismatic and very energetic and theatrical. And I mean, they're hard to find. And so, therefore, on a live basis, you're going to get a fantastic show, essentially. Yeah. And the band looked great too. I mean, it was
it was definitely a punchy band. When I joined the band with Tony Lugerton, we brought that rock and roll edge to the band. So it was a lot more energetic and gutsy. So yeah, you're absolutely right. James was definitely feeding off that energy, and I think that's why we were selected in the first place, just to put a bit of a boot in the background. Yeah,
gotcha. So, okay, so you're back in Australia, so you breaking records at venues, it's all going great.
Yep.
What goes wrong?
Right, okay, so record company had a major debt with us being overseas for so long. They decided the best route was to keep the band on the road whilst it was making money. So we slogged the circuit for about a year and a half with not much time off to write. And when we did finally get time off to write, the record company was really looking for more poppy singles rather than the sort of more alternative that we'd grown into creating. That really dampened James's spirits, and basically he dissolved the band out of being disillusioned with the whole.
When you think about it, Tom, we've seen this all before, where bands are in a sense raped and pillaged because they're told to continue touring to deliver funds. If I remember correctly, that's how the Models went out. They did their last tour to pay off debt.
Yeah.
And,
that's right.
And so it's like, well, you've got all this debt, you just got to keep touring.
Yes.
And how bad is that when you're not going in to actually do recording? I mean, these days, if that's the schedule you've got, you'd still be booking into studios in every town you're in and putting demos down, right?
Yeah.
To go that long without getting ready for a next record, the death knell was already there, quite frankly, wasn't it?
Well, absolutely. You could be doing 9 shows a week, that sort of work, you've got very little energy to do anything else. And if you do manage to get time off, you might have a few days in a rehearsal studio to come up with your next hit. Not the best way to do business.
Yeah, gotcha. So that's it. By that stage, called James Floyd in Berlin. There's an end to that. So what happens? Where did you go?
Well, everybody was shocked by James's decision. James took off overseas and kind of disappeared. Myself and the keyboard player did a bit of auditioning around town for a while. And, you do the odd sessions here and there and, pretend you're doing something. But at the end of it, we really looked at what we wanted to do or, Now,
who was this, the keyboard players? That's Roger Mason.
Yeah, Roger Mason and myself, we sort of, really did take the attitude that what we're going to carry on in Australia, or what do we want to do? So we both decided, look, I think if we're going to start somewhere, let's start in London, where we really felt our roots were, right? So we both moved over to the UK.
When are we talking?
That was the beginning of 1981.
Right, okay.
Or early 81, yeah.
Yep.
So we go over there and, land there for a few dollars in our pockets and we go, well, what the fuck do we do? Anyway, eventually, funny enough, we were approached by people from Australia to do sessions on a new project, which was funded by EMI. That became a very lucrative period where we spent about 3 months doing demos for an album for another fellow. That was well paid. Roger actually went off to do some work with that artist. I went off and started working with some other people. And over the next few years, Roger and myself spent a fair bit of time in the UK following various avenues. He also did some work with Gary Newman. I started doing more session work with EMI over there.
Yeah. Was this the same period that Jeff Duff was over there?
Don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Possibly.
Yeah.
It was like a revolving door over there for Australians. They'd be coming and going every day.
Right.
I remember the birthday party being very popular at the time, which was a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But for Roger and me, Roger's eventually hooked up with Gary again and did a bit of work with Gary, and then eventually went back to Australia. I decided to stay in the UK. As I said, I started doing a fair bit of work for EMI, doing sessions. I eventually joined a band called Scary Thieves for about 6 months, which eventually released some records through EMI, but I'd left them and moved on at that time.
Yeah.
I could go on quite a bit, but I'll try and give you a quick timeline of the UK business. I went from that session work into working with a band called Action Faction, which was a funk band. That lasted about 6 months. Did some work with producer Jeremy Green.
Yeah.
Who had a pretty good reputation. I then got poached from that band into a band called Indians in Moscow.
Yeah. Now we've released Indians in Moscow.
Yeah. So that was an interesting step for me, though they had a very wealthy backer, lots and lots of money. So I went from days in Australia touring as your bread and butter to literally sitting in studio and writing and working with producers for your bread and butter. And that was the difference between Australia and the UK. At that time in the UK, they spent a lot of time and money on developing artists, and that might be bringing in producers and, songwriters and whatever. So it was a whole different story.
How many years had you been over there for?
That was about 2 years. And then, as I say, I was poached by Indian Moscow's record company, and I spent the next 3 odd years under their umbrella.
So you were there for about, 6 or 8 years?
No, 5 years in total.
Yeah, okay.
So, but that was a great experience.
Why come back to Australia when you're virtually settled in the UK?
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any plans on coming back, that's for sure, but I didn't also have a British visa.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was continuously having to renew my status over there.
Yeah. So you were essentially kicked out, really.
That's it.
Yeah.
Kick that man out of London.
Yeah, gotcha. So therefore you return back to Australia, and that's got to be what, mid-80s, a little bit late mid...
About 86, 87 I came back.
Okay, so you come back to Australia. Anything happening, or you just come back and
I
it's a
came
clean
back.
slate?
Yeah, clean slate for a bit, but I got asked to join a band called Geisha, so I hopped onto that little train for a year or two. And
Now, Geisha
went back
had a top 20, yeah?
Yeah, well, I guess so.
Yeah.
I didn't know much about them. I hadn't been in the country.
Yeah.
But we did do a lot of touring. So it was back on the touring train.
Yeah.
And that was quite good. It was quite busy, though.
Yeah.
That eventually ended. I'm just trying to put my timeline together here. Around...
I mean, I remember seeing Geisha with you playing. It'd be the venue.
Yeah,
Right.
Played all those places.
To be like 88.
Oh, well, yeah, actually, I brought a friend of mine back from the UK, a guy called Rob Dean, who was the guitarist for Japan.
All right, so David Sylvan and Japan, yeah?
Yeah, same band. So
Right.
their guitarist.
So you'd become friends with him in the UK, had you?
Yeah. He'd worked with some of the stuff that I was doing over there
Yeah.
with me, etc., on various bands. And then we stayed in contact, and he came over and worked with Geisha for a while, which eventually morphed into us leaving Geisha and getting a record deal with Virgin.
Now, he'd also written with, who was that artist he'd written?
Oh, Sinead
O'Connor. That's right. So, okay. So that's all. Yeah, so that's all happened, and therefore you formed a new band.
Yeah, so out of Geisha, we decided to start up our own band. That band's called the Slow Club. That actually got a deal with Virgin International around 1988.
Yeah.
And that sort of...
Well, if I remember correctly, Tom, at the time, Mushroom were very interested. If I remember correctly, I think it was Mushroom that brought Rob Dean into Australia and sponsored
possibly.
him. And if I can remember correctly, in the foyer of Mushroom were about 8 guitars in the foyer.
Yeah, really.
All being transported over.
Right.
So you obviously had the rounds of the record companies. It was one of those bidding kind of situations, yeah?
Yeah. It was an interesting thing because, I'd never gone out, sourcing record companies for record deals. But there was a bit of help behind us to do that.
Yeah.
So the next thing we knew, we had a deal, and we were recording. I guess the thing to say about the Slow Club was that there was only 3 of us. We weren't a performing band at the time. The record company had taken enough confidence in us to record an album first.
Yeah.
And then try and promote that via,
But you'd obviously put demos together.
Oh, yeah. We did demos. Once again, I hooked up with Roger Mason, who knew Rob as well. And the 3 of us basically, got the demos organised. And then we found a singer. Roger then decided to opt out and go into film producing, which was, a shame that he wasn't involved. But he did play on the album. But we found a singer, Andrew Sefton, and that enabled Rob and myself and Andrew to have enough of a band to get the deal. And then we hired musicians through the recording of the album.
I mean, that's a different point in time, really, because when you can afford to get a deal, there's only 3 of you.
Yep.
So there's no real band as such.
No.
And if you're going to tour, you're going to hire musicians. I mean, you wouldn't have a hope of doing that today.
No, and it wasn't really done that way back then either.
Really?
In Australia, you would normally be playing around and have an established following, and a record company would say, okay, this looks like they know what they're doing. They've got a following. Maybe we can sell some records, right?
Yeah.
Nobody knew us at all. It was purely the confidence and gamble for Virgin that the songs would sell.
But it paid off. I mean, you had a hit to start with, didn't you?
Yeah, look, we had a good start to it. It didn't really go the way we thought it would go. I think the record company's a little bit surprised that it didn't take off more than it did. But once again, the public's a hard one to crack. You never know what's going to go.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, it was a top 20 hit, followed up with a second single. No, I think it was a top 10 hit. Then the second single was a top 20, and then it kind of started to petter out, didn't it?
Yeah. And the band had a few problems. like every band.
Do you reckon though? Do you think that was because essentially it wasn't really a band as such? Because you're saying, if I kind of hear correctly, there it was kind of put together. You didn't do all the touring prior, so therefore you didn't. You weren't close knit like a lot of bands are, because they're in vans and hotel rooms together. And then you have some success, and then you've got hired musicians in. It's fairly difficult, I think, to develop a relationship and a bonding that way. I mean, it really is, I think.
Certainly a different way. It's not unheard of, though. You know, it's just who's writing the music and who's put the effort in from the word go, I mean, I'd known Rob for many years by that time. The singer I didn't really know at all.
Really?
And it was very much new for him. So there was that, I suppose. It was his first substantial band.
Yeah.
But I think more than anything, that band was the wrong band for the time. Coming into the late 80s, early 90s, things were getting pretty rocky and grungy, and we were classified as adult contemporary.
Yeah, did you do any major tours, though? Was there any major?
Yeah. We toured with Steve Winwood. I remember that tour was quite good. And there was a few with some of the Australian larger acts.
Oh, yeah.
So we did tour around a bit, yes.
Yeah, gotcha. So what happens?
So anyway, Virgin get dissolved in the country as Virgin International.
That would have been when they were sold. Yeah, it would have been when they were sold.
Yeah. EMI bought us, I think, or took us over in one fashion or another.
No interest?
And then I think they didn't really have the interest to back any further projects.
Yeah.
So they just let the contract run out, from my memory.
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. So therefore, what happened, Tom? What did you do?
Well, I think Rob went back to the UK.
Yeah.
I took a little hiatus, and then I hooked up with a money gig with the Door Show.
Oh,
Absolutely Live the Door Show.
Yep. Gotcha. So,
which was a good money earner at the day. So I was off just making money after that.
So therefore, off making money. So what happens between then and Remora?
So that brings us up to about 91.
Yeah.
At which time I got married and had kids.
So you've done the start the family scenario, and therefore you need regular money coming in. So and you need a car, and you need school fees, and gotcha. All right.
So out of the music industry and off working.
Yeah. Okay. So therefore we get to let's work up to Remora, and I think that would have been maybe 7 years ago.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And now that I go through my notes, that goes back to, therefore, Fabio Versace, which brings you back to Argus and Steeler.
Yeah.
And you start recording, and I remember at the time you said you wanted to do a tribute record to Glenn Hughes. We're all big Glenn Hughes fans. Fans and trapeze fans. So you wanted to do a trapeze Glenn Hughes. Now, I'm not into tribute records, but I thought, nobody would have done one on trapeze. Definitely not on Glenn Hughes. So I went, wow, this could be interesting. And I knew what Fabio was like as a singer, a sensational singer, and had a very much a Led Zeppelin voice, not so much the Glenn Hughes, but the Led Zeppelin, but could cut across the two. And then you delivered that record to me. And at that stage, we'd started Third Verse, which was the first incarnation of Laneway music, and we released that, and we thought it was absolutely sensational. We just couldn't believe the quality. And you'd recorded that yourself. You'd done it. You were the producer, the engineer, and we were blown away. And so that then brought you to the Led Zeppelin tribute. And I think at the time, to let everybody know, I begged Tom, don't do a Led Zeppelin tribute. It's a hard one to cut. You're really up against the best. And, you said you wanted to do it. And again, it just was fantastic. This record is just doing well. I mean, it's because not only is a fantastic musicianship, and may I add, that we come back to those old days of Argus and Steeler, and James Freud, and who have we got but Tony Lugden from Pseudo Echo, who's playing guitar, and wow, does he cut the mustard? I mean, guitar-wise?
Just for Tony, he did pretty much all the guitar work except for a little bit on one song which John Dallimore did.
Yeah.
But he also did all the bass. Fabulous work with the bass and getting the right sounds. It's not easy.
Yep.
And an old friend of mine from earlier bands, a guy by the name of Tony Featherstone.
Oh, yeah, Tony, who plays with Jimmy Barnes a lot and whatever, and Diesel.
And Noise Works and a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
He was very prominent on the Glenn Hughes tribute album for the keyboard work, and his work was sensational, I have to say that.
Well, I say to everybody, do yourself a favour and have a listen to it because it is fantastic. And then from there on, it's just been release after release. I mean, I've never seen anybody so prolific. It just the releases just keep coming, Tom. So obviously the creative juices have gone nuts.
Yeah. Well, I'm a lucky man. I've got a business that allows me to indulge myself.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I've been able to get some decent studio equipment.
Yeah,
And I have the time. But I still love writing and I love recording. I do a little bit of guitar, bass, and keyboards myself more these days.
Yeah.
But I had the luxury of tapping into friends like John Dallimore, fantastic guitarist, just unbelievable. He's worked with John English. And his background is substantial and amazing.
Well, John Dallimore was Red House, and Red House were, what an album. If we could ever release that, it'd be a miracle, I tell you. What a great record. But that's
what a pleasure.
Name.
What a pleasure to work with a guitarist of that calibre. I'm just lucky in that regard that I've been able to build a studio and have a variety of musicians come in and happy to play and work. Not to mention Steve Morgan has played on a lot of stuff, ex-bass player from Ice House, great bass player. Andy Burns has done a lot of keyboard work.
Yeah.
And I've also had various other people that I won't go into come in and work in the studio and done some work for other artists in the studio. But like you say, I've been lucky to have the time to indulge myself.
Yeah, fantastic, Tom. Well, I suppose that brings us to a bit of a conclusion. For everybody listening, Remora, you can look them up. They do come up quite easily. We're working with the digital world. And if I put in here Remora, which I'm doing, into Spotify, it comes up with Remora artist, and people should look the latest release being, I'll tell you right now, It Begins, and that is the latest release. There is about, let me have a look at how many records we've got. It Begins is the current set of releases. Then you have, there is one song on its own, What Is and What Should Never Be, which is a Led Zeppelin song. And then we go to Secondment, which is another album. And then we go to How Many More Times. And what we're rolling into is a whole new album. There are singles up there, but there is a new record coming called Loud from London, which incorporates a lot of these singles that were released.
Outtakes,
And then we have a tribute to Led Zeppelin, and then we have a tribute to Glenn Hughes and Trapeze. And there will be the new album that will congregate a lot of the releases for Tom coming out in the next month or two. And I presume just song after song, because we work these days in a digital world and we try to release every month, correct? So, Tommy, we look forward to new releases. Thanks for giving us your time. Everybody, Tom Hosie from Melbourne, Australia, and one of the favoured Laneway artists who we love to listen to here in the office. Thanks very much, Tom. And
my pleasure to be on there, Vince, and thanks for all your support.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, buddy.
Well, there you have it, another Laneway Talks. If you enjoyed that, just search Laneway Talks for more great conversations.
G'day folks, Mark Allen here and
The Ox, David Schwartz.
and we've started a brand new podcast called
A couple of blokes, a couple of beers, and we just chew on the fat.
Couple of blokes, couple of beers with Ox and Marco.
I'm thinking about whitening my teeth just so when I smile.
There's a new episode every Wednesday.
Have you got a weight issue?
Of course I do. It's a stupid loaded question.
A couple of blokes, couple of beers with David Schwartz and Mark Allen.
I'm eating the kids' Maltese.
You're eating
Piece
their
of-
Christmas present.
I am a piece of garbage.
Listen wherever you get your podcasts.